Okay, good afternoon to all. We'll open the hearing. I'll call it to order. We would like to acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory in the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Ron Merritt. I'll be your chairperson this afternoon, and introducing the panel members. To my left is Cynthia Stevens, and to her left is Brent McIntyre, and our recording secretary is Katie Snowden, and representing the city from the assessment department is Mr. Howard McCubbin. Just to give you a little bit of background to Mr. Newfield, I just have to mention one thing, and that is past orders will be excluded or given no hearing evidence because it's lacking substance in regards to how they got there. So these are the instructions that we've received from our manager and also our chairperson for the Board of Revision. So I think rather than if you have that particular stuff, we'll just ignore it, and if you wouldn't mind just not bringing it up, but in probably future, it should not be,
Well, and my concern on this, of course, is today is February whatever, and
I realize
a week
Yeah.
left, and we've heard a lot of stuff's been said, so.
It came out just yesterday.
And if it comes, yes,
Okay.
I heard that. But if something happens to come out of my mouth, I'm sure you'll ignore it if you have to.
That is perfectly fine. Okay, so we'll just continue. We'll be hearing application for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and will limit discussions to those matters. The statements that the applicant or the assessor make at the hearing are sworn testimony, and anybody speaking in these matters must be sworn in. Please be advised that comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by City Council and is independent of it, along with the city administration. We make our decisions based on the evidence provided at the hearing and issue a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decision in respect to application may be appealed to the municipal board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to application from exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included in the board's order. In respect to the hearing this afternoon, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We'll then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the other applicant may have, and then it'll be the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each party will have the opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all evidence about the application is brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket this afternoon. The session will close after all applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private to make its decisions. You will receive the order for registered mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live stream recorded and will be part of the public record. We'll ask you, the secretary, to swear in Mr. McCubbin and to affirm Mr. Newfield.
Please state your name.
Howard McCubbin?
Do you affirm that the evidence represented is the truth of the case and the truth?
Yes.
Please state your name.
Rocky Newfield.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to present is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, the first item on the docket that we're going to deal with is 681 Carding. So, Mr. McCubbin, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. File number 19-4510, the applicant is Colliers International. It would be roll numbers 120-222-16000. The address is 681 Cordon Avenue. The owner is United Capital Joint Ventures Limited. The full year we were dealing with is 2020, the reference date being April 1st, 2018. The current assessed value is $771,000, and it's classed at 60 taxable. I do have a recommendation for this property, Mr. Chairman, reducing the value from $771 to $689. Before I get there, I'd like to just describe the property. Briefly, if you can turn to page 9, you see its location on Corden Avenue in Hugo in the northwest corner. The business name, the occupant is Saffron's, which is the restaurant, and there's a parking lot beside the restaurant. On page 10, you can see pictographic on the first frame of the property, and then the other two below the restaurant itself, with the patio being the last photograph there, which is operable obviously in the summertime. We have an effective age of 1985 on this property. The land area is 3218, with the land area being 12,041 square feet. On page 3, I have rents, and we can get into them at some point in time, which are used to justify this property. But turning to page 4, Mr. Chairman, where my
So if you want to speed this along, I'll, for now, I don't have direction from the ownership, but
Okay.
I can accept for now. And I
6
can't promise anything, but
Fair enough.
So, Mr. Newfield, you are in agreement?
well, yeah, I do need
Okay.
direction from
Okay.
town, from the ownership, I guess.
Panel members, anything? Any questions?
No.
Okay. Then we'll press on to the next one, which is 244 Osborne Street. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Kelly.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. 244 Osborne Street, file number 1943999. The applicant is Colliers International. The roll number is 12021274900. The address is 244 Osborne Street. The owner is Intercity Properties Limited. The roll year we're dealing with today is 2020, the reference date being April 1st, 2018. The current assessed value is $1,308,000. Classification is 60 and it's taxable. This is a restaurant, Mr. Chairman, constructed in 1999 with a plan area of 3312 square feet. Land building ratio of 6.32 to 1. We get finish the second page. I do have a recommendation for this property, but I need to go through some information. Consideration of 1.5 and sworn value of 1.5, taking place in June the 22nd, 2015. This is the Burger King on Confusion Corner. On page 3, it has a fast food restaurant. Those are the rents that I've used. With respect to the value, this is a land lease in a sense. I am willing to reduce the value from $1,308,000 to $1,186,000.
Mr. Newfield?
Yeah, I can today accept, I do need final approval from the ownership on this, so.
Okay.
I just always say that, because if you accept, you should really, the end of the matter, I can't promise anything until I go through it. I just found out half an hour ago. So.
Okay. Panel members, any questions?
Nope.
No questions. Okay, we'll go on to 1114 Henderson Highway. Whenever you're ready, Mr. McCutcheon.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. File number 19-4565, the applicant is Colliers International. Roll number 0400043580. The address is 1114 Henderson Highway. The owner is Kildonan Village Limited. The roll year is 2020, the reference date being April 1st, 2018. The current assessed value is $1,536,000, classed at 60. Mr. Chairman, this property, I've been in this property before. It's a town effects and also a Starbucks. It's been retrofitted there's been no vacancy over quite many years ever since it's been retrofitted. I have a recommendation, Mr. Chairman, to reduce the value to $1,399,000. And that's based, if you go to page 4, based on a cap rate increase of 6.75.
Mr. Newfield?
No, we're gonna go ahead on this.
Okay. Mr. McCubbin, the floor is yours.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, if you look at page 3, getting back to the rents that I've used, 726 St. Anne's Beyond Nail Bar, it's at $40 a square foot. The Regent Avenue rent, 1581 Regent, $38 a Starbucks, another Starbucks on Corden, 2025 Corden at $34. We have M&M Meats, this is just a retail venture strip mall on Henderson, it's just for retail purposes, and it is M&M Meats. Again, 963 Henderson Highway, another retail at a lower value compared to restaurants. Mr. Chairman, if you turn your attention to page 4, you will see the current assessed value. The total potential income is $101,529. I'd just like to reference that with what was submitted to the municipal, to the assessment department. You can see a total revenues of $98,539.92 is report. That's on page 17 of my brief. What else can I tell you? So, with respect to this property, it's about 4% vacancy loss and short-term around $8 per square foot. That's based on the NSC Neighborhood Shopping Center, which it's really not. It's more tantamount to a strip mall, and the cap rates would be lower. We've used the capitalization rate of 6.15%. What I've done, Mr. Chairman, I've said in my presentation just earlier, I've increased the cap rate to 6.75 on this, arriving...
6.75?
Correct.
Okay.
So, arriving at a value of $1,399,000. Now...
Mr. McCubbin, did your NOI change at all? Or no?
No, my NOI did not change.
Okay.
My NOI was, it's 94,487.
So just a cap rate?
It's just a cap rate adjustment on this property.
Thank you.
And, show me photographs, that's my presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Newfield, questions?
Yes, other than your change in the cap, is the rest of the valuation done by your model?
That's correct, yes.
And this is called, when the valuation was done on this, was it done under neighborhood shopping center?
Yeah, it was done, Mr. Chairman, on the neighborhood shopping center, which I don't agree with. It's not the size or the configuration of the neighborhood shopping center. It's more tantamount to a retail straight or a strip mall, period. So, and with respect to those inputs, it would be higher if it was a strip mall. The cap rate would be lower. The cap rate would be more around 6.15%. That's why I've increased the cap rate too. So, to me, it's been classed low.
And in your model, I understand that there's certain changes that occur on the cap rate based on the size of the unit. So,
Right.
is it fair to say that as the size is smaller, your cap rates decrease?
That's correct. Particularly with the strip mall, which is, this is under 5,000.
5,000? Okay.
It's under 5,000. This would be more of a retail than a strip mall. Strip mall is over 5,000.
Those are my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
So the area of both the leased premises is generally, pretty much the same, 1688, 1630.
It's virtually the same.
So the rent is being applied based on what kind of business is there?
The type of finish within the unit, the restaurants, Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman, is usually that they're at a high rate because they're chock full of a lot of fixtures that are.
Okay, and so you adjusted the cap, like you were saying, like you just said a minute ago, I think I heard you say that normally this type of property would be at about a 6.15, but you adjusted the cap based on the fact that you thought that this was categorized wrong. Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was categorized wrong. It's a building that's been retrofitted into in particular currently Starbucks, and it's been doing good stuff. Yeah.
Okay, good, that's all I have, thanks.
I thank you. Mr. McIntyre?
Yeah, and I have no questions.
I have none, so Mr. Newfield, your presentation.
Thank you. Subject property is a redeveloped Wendy's operation, and was built as a single tenant fast food service operation. And when that lease expired, it was converted to multiple units and leased to the current tenants. We're using the statement as the basis for our value. Page 3, just a couple of issues on the statement. The rent, $94,939 plus $3,600 in signage, which is $98,539. The recovery revenue is $53,000. I'll come back to that. Then you'll see recovery adjustments. These are prior period adjustments, so they don't form part of the income. And it's a statement. I'm familiar with this site, we manage it, and I know what these adjustments are for. It is prior period, not current period. On to page 4, you'll note that the expense declared is $48,695, and recoveries are $53,745. So that's going to turn around and turn into a prior period credit back on the 18 side. So when we get the 18 statement, you're going to see instead of being a positive like this one, it'll end up being a negative. So they are only allowed to recover what they spend. Those are the two strange things about this, and it's because of the style of lease and the nature of the recoveries that they work. So it is, in most cases, a net lease. After that, there are non-operating costs of $17,000, and they include commissions and other things. So we're using the rent from the revenue at $98,545, and I don't know why it differs from $98,540, extra $5 slipped in there. Vacancy, we're looking at two things. One is the East Kildonan, and I have to check if this is even East Kildonan. This might be another category. Somehow I don't think this is East Kildonan. Is it?
I think it's North Kildonan.
Yes, you're correct.
Yeah.
Got this happening all the time. Never leave your suburb, you don't know what the rest of Winnipeg is like. So, North Kildonan actually is experiencing a higher vacancy, but it's a bit of an anomaly. It had been clipping along about between 5 and 7%. In 16 and 17, it jumped up to 9% and 11%, and that's a bit of an anomaly. There's actually, Johnson tracks a restaurant rate, and it's 5%. Now, the sample size, this is a citywide rate, is 349,000, so that is a fairly small sample size in relation to the 22 million in total inventory. And the other rate to consider is the overall retail rate, which is 5.2%. So we've applied at 6.4%. I think arguably that is a point too high, which won't change much on our valuation. We are applying 5%. That's not 5%. See, I told you, I hadn't looked at these, and now I'm looking at them now, and I'm thinking like, let's just see here, okay. It should have been just 5%. There are non-recoverables that occur. Now, in addition to the ones I pointed out to you, this operation has an independent asset manager who it still costs them money, and so this is still, takes away from the bottom line. So 5% is more than appropriate. All right, well, I'm going to make some small adjustments here, and so the non-recoverables should be 4612, and I'm changing the vacancy to 5%. So my NOI is $85,717, and that's an adjustment of the vacancy to 5%, non-recoverables to 5%, and the shortfall is changes as well by the same ratio as the vacancy. So 85,717. The site is technically wouldn't fit inside our Collier's study, and it would be deemed a strip. And the reason technically it wouldn't is because of its the size, but it does have one national tenant and one tenant with a national image, although it's a franchise operation, which means that it has the ability to attract a national client, and as a result, it would be at the lower end of our range, which is 7%, not much different than the assessor has. That comes to a value of $1,224,529, rounded to $1,225,000. So we have actual rent and our Collier's national our rates on strip. That's my presentation.
I thank you. Mr. McCubbin?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So this is a new file, looking at page 1 of your brief, you combine both areas, obviously,
Yes.
and applied the same rent, but essentially you said you had gone with the income and expense statements, that's where you modeled your rent from, specifically?
That's the net revenue, yes.
And the non-recoverables are those are all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you. Mr. Stevens?
So you, so you put 5% on the non-recoverable?
That's correct.
So, okay. So the city's got 2 and you're at 5.
Well, no, we have an additional non-recoverable of a structural reserve, which is $830, and that's because no lease covers structural repairs, and the major structural need in any building will be roof. So we budget 25 cents a foot, which over 20 years provides about $20 a square foot to replace the roof, or the membrane anyway.
Okay. And I think I followed the rest of that, so, and you said the cap was based on the national cap for?
Oh, sorry, well, it's our national study, but
National
it's
study.
the Winnipeg number, which is, we show for this is rare for me because I keep saying this, I have like over 600 appeals, and of these, 10 or 20 might be good grade. Most of mine are inferior to this. So I never really rely on that report much, but our range is between 7 and 8%.
Yeah, it's under strip mall, page 25.
Correct.
Okay, okay, good, that's all I had, thank you.
I thank you. Mr. McIntyre?
And I have no questions.
Submission either party?
Oh, goodness, sure.
Okay, also? Okay. Okay, let's go to the last one on the docket, at 646 Archibald. Mr. McCubbin, whenever you're ready.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. File number 19-4813, the applicant is Colliers International, the roll number is 06093016-100. The address is 646 Archibald Street. The owner is Terrapon Development Limited. The roll year is 2020, the reference date being April the 1st, 2018. The current assessed value is $1,600,000, class at 60 and taxable. This is a Tim Hortons restaurant, constructed in 2001, has a rather large land to building ratio of 18.94:1. I do have a recommendation with respect to this property, but I will give you some more information in the interim before I get to that. On page 3, you can see the rents that I'm using. They're all Tim Hortons franchises, and you can see here their relative values. We're using $35.52 on this property with 3% vacancy loss and a 6.35% cap rate. With respect to this property, Mr. Chairman, I'm changing a cap rate from 6.35 to 7%, using the same net operating 101,627. That's our $1,452,000 in terms of value. As we move further into my presentation, you can see on page 9 the site itself. If you ever travel by there, which I'm sure you did, in Marion Archibald, it's set back and away from Marion. There, I spoke to the land drainage engineer for this specific area, Andrew Ziegler, and there is, if you look, there's Happy Land Park to the immediate left of this property, which borders the same river, and there's a creek coming through the property in the front. You can see a culvert there, maybe, or maybe you can't, but it's on the green spot, the part that's undeveloped. So there's a good portion of this lot that's not undeveloped. This property, the land is owned by Terrapon Development Limited and Tim Hortons Structure. There's a land lease on the property, and the land lease, you can see on page 15 that was reported based on the no-build zone, based on sort of taking away the no-build zone of $25,376. We have a land rate of $1.20 per square foot. So just for reference, that's just the land rate. This is the land lease on the property. They pay $42,000 a year. That's my presentation.
McCubbin, just for the record, did you tell us the amount? I figured it out. but,
Oh,
you know,
sorry,
I-
the total amount with the change
Yes.
in the cap rate is $1,452,000.
Mr. Newfield?
And sorry, what was the cap rate?
The cap rate was 7%,
Seven.
even from 6
I think we're just gonna argue a bit on the rent.
Okay. I thank you, Mr. McCubbin. Mr. Newfield, questions?
Yes, page 3, You said that these were all Tim Hortons?
That's correct.
No, are they actual rents of buildings, or are they some sort of rent of the land with a contribution towards the building?
To my knowledge, what's been reported is the net rents of these Tim Hortons.
Well, I'm just wondering why, because, you know, some of them are short-term and some of them are long-term.
Right.
And my understanding of Tim Hortons is that if they ever had money towards their building, that it was usually a flat rate of money involved for them to spend as they wish, and then there was a land lease. So that's why I'm asking the question. You don't know that for 100% sure?
I don't know that for 100%. That's something that we should be investigating. I've came across in the past, Mr. Chairman, where these rents were essentially just land leases, and they came in and they built the building themselves, especially these franchises. So technically, the rate should be higher when you think about it in terms of what they're reporting, but this is the information we have right now. Further investigation.
Well, the shortfall rate at $750,
Right.
I'm just wondering whether you would even calculated the tax contribution towards this.
That shortfall rate, Mr. Chairman, is driven by the puck being a restaurant. It's a RST. It's a restaurant, and it's a freestanding chain restaurant. And this is what we've been applying to for consistency throughout our application with respect to properties like this.
But in your model and in your valuation, you would agree that the rent applied is very much at the higher end of the range, isn't it?
The rent applied is, it's up there with respect to, if you compare to, I guess, a mom and pop restaurant. We've consistently applied these rents unless there's an anomaly out there in the 30s for properties.
Well, I'm just saying on properties overall. I mean, I think I remember it was a long time ago, maybe it was this morning, we had shortfall rates of $7 and rents
Right.
applied at $10 to $12 on
Okay.
strips.
Fair enough.
So I'm thinking if your rent is 3 times higher, why is your shortfall still down in the sevens?
Because shortfall rates are essentially, I guess, taking into consideration, a lot of it is the vacant portion that you're trying to calculate, which may be vacant or not, and the utilities used are essentially the same nominal amount of the utility used in some clearing of the snow. A lot of the shortfall rate, that's built in fixed expenses. With respect to the taxes, the tax rate obviously would make a difference, but the other expenses that we use for shortfalls are just operating the building. That's going to be a shortfall to the owner. This has not been vacant since its inception. I suspect if the owner, if this was to be vacant, you would see a totally different number, because the landlord would be left with the building and the valuation of the property.
In today's hearing, I've noticed 3 different vacancy rates, and essentially we're dealing with generally restaurants that see 2, 3, and 4%. So these all come from the model, and what would
Yes,
the
and the
difference
class,
be?
and the way they're classed, yeah, they weren't overridden, it's just model-driven numbers based on the type of property. Whether it's freestanding or it's a mom-and-pop restaurant, and whether it's a strip mall versus a neighborhood shopping center, these all have an impact on business.
Those are my questions.
I thank you. Ms. Stevens?
I think I'm good, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
And I have no questions.
I have none. So, Mr. Newfield, the floor is yours.
I think the assessor and I are probably on the same page in regard to the theory on Tim Hortons. We just don't see rents for Tim Hortons. And one has to look at rents for similar styles of properties just to see what the market will bear. And you know, what we had done is, page 3, these are a lot of, these aren't standalone coffee shops. These are a different style. We had looked at standalone franchise rents supplied by the assessment department on page 4. Haven't had an opportunity to inspect these, but these were listed as rents, and you'll notice that one of these is 831 Dakota, which the assessor has here today. We've also seen the 2 rents from the former Wendy's operation, which is a good indication of what the site could generate in the market for alternative use on 2 high-demand properties, which averaged to $29. It's not so much that you're focused on just a fast food operation, but you're focused on the style, a building with enough space to drive around, to have the drive-through that has a good presence. So we think the value is, we were concurring with the previous assessment we saw at $30.23, and this was on other rents that were supplied. A vacancy, we're using 3.7, that's a cross between the overall Johnson vacancy for restaurants at 5% and tempered by St. Boniface, which has a better overall rate. I know this one's in St. Boniface, so we're applying 3.7%. And I think that that's the proper way to do it, is look at the industry, look at the neighborhood, and consider alternate uses as well. We are applying non-recoverables at 5% because the site does generate non-recoverables. We don't know what they are because it's a land lease, and I can say with some confidence that I'm familiar with the method by which this landlord does their statements, and they do have a lot of non-recoverables. I think it's a standard application, and the higher your investment rent as type is, the more you're going to see it. Our study is in the back. So we put in 5%, a structural reserve as well, which is hypothetical because the tenant owns the building. Landlord has ground lease, has no structural reserve. He just doesn't care. It's like, what do I care if the building rots out? I still get my $42,000 rent. But we are looking at the whole building. And a restaurant has a higher requirement for structural reserve than most, and that's just due to the nature of the HVAC equipment that's added on and the additional code requirements for them. A shortfall, I did ask the question, and if you do the math, the actual taxes, if the assessment was reduced to $1,452,000, work out to $11.50 a foot. And then if you're vacant, you gotta pay it. So just on tax alone, it's $11.50. Now, our calculation at 1091 was, I think, based on the last assessment, which I know I'm not supposed to talk about. So we'll call it $11.50. And our estimate is $14.36. The concept here is clear. The shortfall has to equal the property type. It can't hypothetically be a market-driven thing based on a larger collection of properties, 90% of them who have lower taxes than the subject. The primary component of any shortfall is the tax, and there's no way to turn it off. Your utilities, at least you can shut them off and hopefully get a reduction in their use, but you can't turn off the taxes. So that is a major issue. So we're at an NOI of 81,495, and I think based on what I said earlier, I don't have a problem with the 7%. I think it would be deemed to be a good investment, a competitive investment. And again, it's because it's going to be perceived as an international strength covenant, but it's not so much for taxing the business, it's the ability for this to attract another user. So my number is 1,164,214. and that is our NOI at the recommended cap of 7%. Round that to 1,164,000. And if I knew what the previous assessment was, I'd tell you, even though I'm not allowed to. New client for us.
Mr. Newfield, is that it?
That's it.
Okay, I thank you. Mr. McCubbin, questions?
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. So in your application of an overall rent, Mr. Newfeld, you applied a net rent of $30.23 a square foot. But on page 3, you have rents that these, I suspect these are not of the same.
Well, that's what I said when I presented
Fair
them.
enough.
They tended to be more sit-down style.
And you've taken, to get at that, you've just taken an average of rents for various types of restaurants, which are located on page 4, is that correct?
These were, as we enter the end of our tax appeal season, these were rents that were quoted by the assessment department, and we just reviewed our appeals and looked at this data they had presented. And the difficulties with these is that we're not 100% sure that some of these don't include TIs in their development. That's a very common thing. So these are not reviewed, not audited, presented as they are. I suspect that in the analysis, we're going to probably find out that some are impacted by TIs and amortization, which would indicate lower net effectives, but for now, this is what we've got. And we did have, as I mentioned, the overall real rate of the last property at $29 for the both sides.
But you do realize it's always been our position not to include TIs when calculating.
No, your position was, this goes back to the municipal board hearing where somebody tried to double dip. And what they did is they brought a statement and costs were taken off the statement, but then they said, well, look, my net effective rent is effectively less because you have to take off these TIs. So I read that case, and I don't disagree with the board's ruling on that, is you don't double dip. And it was also on the property itself that the ruling was made. What we're talking about are comparables, which is a different category. If you're going to use a comparable, it's got to be clean. And my opinion here, not my opinion, but the basic way you go with this is if you are able to calculate the net effective because you have actual documentary evidence to prove it, you can adjust it. If you don't, you throw it out. You don't rely on it. All I'm saying is these ones we provided you have not been vetted. They're just presented without editing.
So the rent could be higher or lower than, is that what you're saying?
Only lower.
Anyway, I wouldn't belabor that point. If moving along, with respect to shortfall for this property, so this property was constructed in 2001, is that correct?
I think so.
Has there been any vacancy in on this property since its inception?
I really don't know. I think that I don't know about physical vacancy or financial vacancy.
Yeah.
No idea.
Okay, but generally when a property like this goes vacant, it's 100% vacant, is it not?
That's right, it's 100% or nothing.
And after a couple of years, we would atone for that, would we not?
Well, as I understand the city assessor's policy is that they do have a chronic vacancy that's applicable for after a few years, but I don't particularly think we're here to discuss that policy. What we're here to discuss is the general philosophy of all appraisal. You always allow a vacancy and a shortfall. It's part of the risk management. And the assessor does it, we do it. We may disagree on the rates, but it has to be done.
So over this 3.7% vacancy rate, over how many years do you estimate that to be for a property like this?
No, that's a risk you would
That's just
apply
a risk.
in your valuation.
But if the property was vacant, it would be 100% vacant.
That's correct.
Those are all questions I have.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens?
I'm good, thank you.
Mr. McIntyre?
And I have no questions.
Mr. Newfield, I guess our secretary pointed out that you've appealed 3 points.
On this property?
That's what, you
Did I actually file it? I did?
So, do you wanna deal with those?
No, I'm gonna ask if you could just deny me, as you see fit. My concern with this property is that right now, the city of Winnipeg I don't think it's gonna get approval, but there are 6 plans out for the new Marion bypass. I don't think it's gonna happen. They don't have the money for it, but, I don't wanna worry about it later. We'll wait and see what happens with that.
So what do you want us to do with that?
You can just deny
Okay.
it, if you could, please, or confirm it.
Confirm?
it, Yeah,
Confirm?
yes.
Okay. I think somebody should lead the party.
I'm
No?
good.
Okay. I think that concludes our business this Winterfield. And you already know some of the results, and you may attend the next one. Mr. McCubbin, thank you kindly.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.